the secret files of Teletraan 2.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another Files from Teletraan 2. We are continuing our build-up to the end of the road for IDW, where I get someone on, someone in the community, to chat about something to do with IDW. Really, the topic is up in the air. It's whatever that person wants it to be. And this year, I have... I'm sure it's this year. I have a first timer to the Moonbase. Sir, introduce yourself.
Hey, I am Callum, known on various websites as Jalaguy. I hang around the Transformers wiki, and I did once upon a time have a podcast related to the Hasbro universe era of IDW, which is going to be topical, I guess.
Yeah. Got you on because you've got some interesting opinions. I've been following you online for many a year. I'm pretty sure we were in a TF Nation or Auto Assembly quiz team once.
Yeah, no, I think so.
Yeah. I think I lost us that one because someone ran up with a question and I remembered a missing answer and just started screaming, "Knockout, it's knockout." But it was too late. For the topic this time around, you decided, unsurprisingly perhaps, on the Hasbro universe. So, for anyone who's not in the know, who may not have read that era of IDW, what is the Hasbro universe?
Well, around the start of what is otherwise sort of the third season of the I was going to say Phase 2, but IDW have decided to be weird and call it Phase 2. But around the third season of the John Barber, James Roberts era of IDW picked up a bunch of extra licenses for Hasbro properties, and then. The story, as sort of the creatives have told it, was that sort of it kind of emerged naturally. This idea that what if we put all these extra licenses we've picked up together in one universe? I think the story goes that Chris Ryle and Christos Gage had been thinking, we've got Rom, but Rom can't go run into the X-Men or anything like he used to now because we don't own those. What characters could he run into? And they said, what if he ran into G.I. Joe? And then I think, Cullen Bunn was on Micronauts, and obviously sort of the Micronauts will traditionally wind up on Earth. And then what Earth could they show up on? Maybe it's the same Earth, and it all resulted in this big scheme to declare that IDW's Transformers and G.I. Joe output had actually been in the same continuity all along, and then to introduce this host of extra Hasbro licenses in, and it ran through to pretty much the end of that continuity. And it divides opinion to this day.
It's actually kind of interesting. In the build-up to this, I was like, I haven't read those in a while. I better go back and check them, and all my issues are gone. And then I found out that last year in March, all the non-Transformer licenses for Mask, Action Man, Revolutionary, and First Strike all disappeared from Comixology.
They did. Yeah, I think they still exist. You can still get at them as the sort of backups and stuff, I think. But
I couldn't, but because I think they limited access anyway. But as far as I know, there's no. The only way to get them now is physical.
Yeah. They've. I believe at this point, I think they still have Micronauts and Rom because they did that odd little miniseries around sort of the start of the pandemic kind of time.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Which I don't know why that I genuinely wonder if that existed purely so Ryle could justify renewing the ROM license.
Mm.
And then they seem to have kept Micronauts up so that they can keep selling ROM versus Micronauts, would be my guess. Because that's... And I mean, that's something we can get onto. But yeah, ROM versus Micronauts is in fact the finale of the ROM storyline.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, I believe so. Yeah, Action Man lapsed and Mask lapsed, and then that took with them, anything that said kind of Revolution on it, and anything that said First Strike on it.
So, that all, presumably that, I was going to say that lost us Revolutionaries as well, which I think is a big shame.
Yeah.
So, why did you want to talk about this?
So yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting topic because I mean, there's lots of there's lots of parts of IDW I just have sort of mostly just kind of praise for, sort of kind of John Barber's run. I kind of just pretty much I enjoy a lot. And there's other parts that I know that, if I was going to talk about, I would just wind up sort of getting, bummed out by how much it disappointed me in the end. But I think, the Hasbro universe, it was something that kind of I followed along a lot. I co-hosted a podcast following it along. And I think sort of it's kind of, was really interesting both as sort of, in terms of the storytelling it did. It's interesting in terms of, from kind of a real life perspective, of sort of how kind of editorial and things kind of, wound up handling it. And, it sort of it got kind of, goods and bads. And, it's, well, kind of as I said before, but to this day, every kind of everyone's got an opinion on it, and sort of it's normally quite polarized.
Just out of curiosity, what's the part of IDW that you just don't get behind?
Let's not get behind, but in the end, More Than Meets the Eye was my first love at IDW, but kind of by the end, I'd fallen out of love with it, and it disappointed me a little in the end, I felt.
Well, I mean, at some point I want to talk about certainly the Barber and the Roberts era in detail, because I have both very conformative and very non-conformative opinions. So the Hasbro universe, in terms of properties, we have got Transformers, obviously. G.I. Joe, which was retconned, if I remember this right, that basically everything that happened in the G.I. Joe comics leading up to the 2016 event, Revolutionaries, was set in the 3 years post All Hail Megatron and the ongoing?
No, I think what they settled on was that it took place, most of it took place between the Transformers leaving Earth at the end of the Costa ongoing, and them getting back, or at least sort of the parts where like G.I. Joe and Cobra were sort of like were fighting each other in public rather than sort of having a little sort of secret war against each other.
Okay. Because I know it was like retcon, like a lot of their tech was like secretly or originated from like lost Cybertronian stuff. Like because Micronauts, ROM, Gemini Holograms, which was loosely connected, shall we say. Action Man, Mask, which again like was very strongly connected to the whole Cybertronian thing. Clue, of all things, and Visionaries, which people forget happened.
It's
I try to.
Don't blame you.
Yeah, I was doing live reviews of comics for that one, and it was like that was an experience. Not a good way to meet a new editor. So, in terms of major stories that sort of brought it in, the first one was, of course, G.I. Joe had its own ongoing Micronauts ROM, and I believe Mask had like full miniseries before the Revolution crossover event. Action Man only, I think he had a short. I think he had a one-off.
No,
I
so
don't remember.
how it went, I think, was so yeah, Action Man got a miniseries ahead of Revolution.
Okay, yeah.
And ROM and Micronauts had the kind of the first trade paperback of an ongoing series before Revolution. But then Mask's ongoing actually didn't start until after.
Oh, right. Yeah, because it had like it had it had annual. Oh yeah, I see this.
Yeah, they used kind of Revolution to sort of do an origin story almost for Mask.
And then following Revolution, ROM would continue on for about another half a year. Micronauts got I think another short run, again wrapped up in about half a year, and then they merged into ROM and the Micronauts. Mask ran for a bit, was very unpopular, and got cancelled, and basically got integrated into a crossover book called Revolutionaries, which was essentially, or was you? Yeah, because was there a Mask character in Revolutionaries? Or
no.
Because I know Mask was integrated. No, Mask was integrated into G.I. Joe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of after the sort of after Revolution, they did about sort of 2 trade paperbacks worth of stuff, and then it was First Strike, after which ROM and Micronauts merged for ROM and the Micronauts, and Mask and G.I. Joe merged for the inexplicably named Scarlet Strike Force.
Oh yeah. Okay. And Action Man just kind of hung out in Revolutionaries.
Yeah, sort of. It was just basically like the continuation of his book almost.
So Revolutionaries was basically a surprisingly short run, but it was basically like their Avengers, like some Transformers characters, some G.I. Joe characters. The Micronauts made a couple of appearances, and so on and so on. And Action Man. And then the next big crossover event was First Strike in 2017, which, while marketed via Transformers, was mostly Scarlet's story, with a lot of framing from villains and heroes from all the other books. And then they kind of toddled along. We would get we get a couple of crossover books. Micronauts and Wrath of Karza featured a lot of Transformers. Then, of course, there's ROM versus the Transformers, which was a miniseries set before all our stuff, and introduced a new triple changer. Oh no, I can't remember her name.
Star Drive.
I love Star Drive. I apologize for getting the name. And also built up the Dire Rates and their role in things. I'm just skimming through things. And then the next stories that would be brought in would really be the Visionaries, which were tied into the Cybertronian arc. Didn't get introduced in the best way, I will say. And then this all culminated in a lot of books being cancelled and us getting the Transformers Unicron book. Now, I forgot to mention G.I. Joe there, but G.I. Joe was probably the most important because, unlike the other books, there were many active G.I. Joe characters in the Barber run, and there was a very prominent Cybertronian character getting really his first significant piece of characterization, probably ever in the G.I. Joe book, in Skywarp, who was basically redefined as arsehole, for want of a better term, who hated everyone, but really kind of liked them underneath it all when you dug deep down, and wasn't happy about the whole no teleport thing. So, what do you want to say about this? How do you want to get us started?
I think perhaps sort of it's interesting to think about it from the real world perspective, because I think sort of there's a prevailing narrative even today that the whole thing was an exercise in Hasbro coming along and making demands of IDW to, oh yes, you've got to do a shared universe, because they'd been sort of years ago by that point, hadn't there? But the sort of the news stories about how they were totally going to make Hasbro shared universe for films. I think that sort of that then sort of informed people's opinions. But kind of as far as we have been told by sort of all the sort of people who architected it, that it genuinely was just that the writers involved thought it would be fun to have all these guys together, which kind of I kind of admire just the sort of that kind of just sort of mixing everything together in the toy box spirit. And I think kind of the success of Revolution as sort of a kind of startup to all this was, I think, really just that it was sort of a nice kind of like old fashioned kind of comic book event where just the heroes run into each other and have a fight for a bit because of a misunderstanding, but then the villains have teamed up and they put aside their differences and have a big fight, and it's just sort of a good bit of fun. But then I think sort of where things then subsequently struggled was sort of maintaining this as a sort of an ongoing universe, particularly when, as it became quickly quite clear, they struggled to keep some of these books on shelves for sort of more than like kind of one or two kind of trades worth. An editorial would sort of have increasingly weird ideas as to how to sort of keep things ticking over.
Yeah, it was a strange time. You got this book coming out, you got Revolution coming out, and it was very much like classic. I would say classic Marvel more than classic DC. All your toys in the box at once. I can't say I love it. There are elements of it I quite like, but I can't say I love it. But it is very it is probably one of the few classic comic book crossovers Transformers has ever done. And then what struck me was as we moved on into the post-Revolution era, into the universe era, the shared universe. No, it's not just, apart from the fact that a lot of books weren't selling, a lot of them couldn't gain traction because, in my mind, because a lot of them were being subsumed into Transformers. Like, it's something that worked for our books, for the Transformer side of things, because it expanded that universe. It brought in stuff like ROM, it brought in the G.I. Joe element, the Mask element, blah, blah. But when you looked at how the other books handled it, very few, I think, were actually able to process the concept of functioning in a world with Transformers, so they either completely ignored it, or they tried to introduce it in what I'd call unsatisfactory ways. And I think Mask would be the big culprit for me there. Because Mask tried to have its own identity, but it also inextricably linked itself into Transformers with the their technology essentially originates from Blitzwing. But then it kind of wanted you to kind of forget that towards the end of the book. And it didn't help. I didn't think it was a particularly well written book either. In contrast, like ROM and Micronauts, I thought were great books. I really, really enjoyed them. I thought Micronauts suffered in the second half of the run, but I think Cullen Bunn, this is what actually introduced me to Cullen Bunn as a writer. I thought he did a really, really good story in that first volume, and they were one of the best parts of Revolution. Inarguably one of the best parts of Revolution. So it's an interesting thing for me in that it never got its feet under it. And I think no one fell in love with the non-Transformer books. Or if they did, it was just such a small percentage.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. I think ROM versus Transformers is a 5 out of 5 full marks kind of book. I adore it. I think it's fantastic. I think it brings in so many cool stuff from the ROM side of things and from the Transformer side of things. It builds on our lore. It builds on ROM's lore. I think First Strike is great. I really, really like First Strike. I really like the fact it's from a non-Transformers perspective in your POV character. I like how it brings in the Transformers. It gives a few Transformers we don't see much of, like the Victorion twins. They get to do something cool.
Mm.
A lot of stuff with the human villains, and it gives the human villains a pretty understandable motivation, which I thought was cool. But yeah, for me, it's like it never developed its own heart.
Yeah,
Does that make
no, I think there is sort of a kind of a refrain from kind of Transformers fans that having all these Hasbro characters introduced kind of brought down the Transformers stories. But I think really it was the other way around. I think the Transformers stories got this sort of quite fun benefit of having a an extended cast of sort of interesting characters to play with, kind of when they wanted to. I mean, so certainly, yeah, John Barber had an awful lot of fun playing with all these new characters he had access to.
Yeah, but... I called revolutionaries as someone took the brakes off John. Oh God.
But then I think from the other perspective, for kind of if you were kind of a God forbid, if you were a Mask fan, I mean, well, no, I say that the Mask toys are very endearing. I just don't think there's ever been good Mask fiction. But yeah, if you were a Mask fan, just coming into this looking to read a new Mask comic or kind of whichever franchise, things were put in a sort of a weird spot. And yeah, like you say, all these books did have to sort of try and find a way to tell their stories in the shadow of a world that is sort of necessarily defined by the fact that the Transformers are there too. And sort of, yeah, they had kind of varying degrees of success with it. Like sort of, yeah, G.I. Joe obviously like bent into it and yeah, literally put a Transformer in the book. Then sort of Mask as well has the sort of odd feeling that as I'm pretty sure that the second and final, because yeah, it lasted like 10 issues, but the second and final trade of Mask, I'm pretty sure has that fella from, is it Megatron's Master Plan in it?
Oh yeah, Sean Berger.
Yeah, and there's a sense that, and especially because Brandon Easton had before and since done Transformers work, I certainly got a sense at times like it felt like he would almost rather be writing a Transformers book for this and has gotten stuck with Mask. So yeah, sort of, it was, yeah, I think kind of ultimately, yeah, sort of, I would say that, yeah, it actually wound up sort of serving the Transformers side of things far better than the others.
It's a weird one because you'd think a lot of these would sort of bend together so much better because they are very much born from the same genetics. But I think one of the things was like if you were reading Mask, it was because of nostalgia for something for that hadn't had fiction in years.
Yeah.
If you were doing Action Man, same. If you're doing Visionary, same. If you're doing Transformers or G.I. Joe, they've had ongoing fiction on and off for 30 years. At the time. Like, they really had no issue drawing people in that way. Because they had generations of fans, whereas I think Mask and such had a generation of fans who frequently weren't buying comics. So, and saying you're selling a Mask book on the fact it's basically a spin-off of Transformers is not going to draw in, I think, a lot of new readers. It's an awkward one, I think. But anyway, let's look at something. What do you think were some good points about the Hasbro universe? What do you think was like if someone said like sell the concept to me?
So I think kind of for me the standouts were the kind of the stories where it did kind of give writers sort of the ability to kind of tell stories they couldn't have otherwise, whether it's just sort of something like Revolution where it is just directly a sort of smash all your toys together thing, or Revolutionaries, where John Barber gets to sort of play with sort of two separate existing comic continuities, and then sort of mix it up with kind of the like 70s and 90s GI Joe that no one cares about, and then kind of sprinkling guest appearances from everyone else, or kind of stuff like First Strike that kind of is able to use that to do sort of a character driven like Scarlet story, like you said, essentially, but sort of putting Scarlet in a story that she could never have been in without this shared universe. I think the strength is absolutely sort of having all these guys existing in a world together kind of opens up new stories you can tell, because I think sort of a way I kind of like to think about it is almost in a given Transformers story, say, the human characters sort of are always inevitably going to sort of be playing second fiddle. They are characters who have been created to support kind of the main characters of the franchise, in that case Transformers. But if kind of then instead you can have kind of Transformers kind of up against or sort of interacting with GI Joe characters, say, these are guys who have these are characters that have been kind of conceived to be sort of interesting and exciting characters in their own right. And I think it sort of it kind of not even just kind of allows, but sort of encourages writers to sort of do stuff, tell stories with Transformers that they wouldn't have in kind of a purely Transformers book, or kind of tell stories with GI Joes that they wouldn't have in a purely GI Joe book.
So, in what way would you say?
So whether it is just stuff like kind of getting to do a story where the kind of a character piece for Scarlet about her confronting the fact that her mentor is trying to commit genocide against robots, or just something simple like kind of what if Action Man had a fun friend who was a robot
and had a crush on had a crush on Arthur, if I remember right.
Well, the sort of the joke winds up going that Action Man's type is, unfortunately for him, lesbians are too old for him. Because of course, there's also Dr. X, who is Action Man's work mum and work crush and arch nemesis.
Yeah.
But well, it was never technically a thing. But I think we all assumed that Dr. X and the new Storm Shadow were a thing.
So yeah, like for me, it was an interesting thing because whenever I think of the Hasbro universe, when I'm thinking what's great about it, I think of those handful of books that just went nuts on the concept.
Yeah.
First Strike, Rom versus Transformers are kind of the two big ones, because I don't think any was as honest and took advantage of it so much, because I will say one of the flaws I think of the Hasbro universe is that you had to be reading Transformers books to guess half the big events. Like, you were screwed if you were only reading like G.I. Joe or something like that. You'd be
absolutely.
But because G.I. Joe was like in a volcano punching a giant yeti. Because Aubrey Stitterson was weird. But those books, like, they wanted, like, okay, what does it actually mean when these two concepts encounter each other? Which a lot of crossovers say they're about, but they're not, because they're about fights. Like, easy Transformers one, Transformers versus Avengers, wasn't about anything.
No,
just wouldn't it be cool if Captain America tried to punch Ratchet? Like, and it turned out no, it wasn't. But the Devil's Due one, like I really enjoy it back in the day, but it's also one like again it's just about like here's two sides, go punch. Whereas the Rom versus Transformers one is about what effect have Cybertronians had to the wider world and how they're viewed, and what effect does being a child of two places have on you sometimes when you don't have your own identity, and Star Drive's made to hate what she is and also be feared for what she is. On the other hand, like First Strike is like a really interesting breakdown of what it is for someone like Scarlet to realize that her mentor has become the kind of individual that she has always believed she should never be in power, and how it played out in that regard, and also bring in the stuff with like giving Soundwave a lot more to do. What I think was really good because he again provided an interesting perspective and kind of finalizing a lot of elements of Optimus's relationships to other people at the time. So for me, that's the strength of it, when it really bought into the concept. And I think the books that didn't work were the ones that like they tried to pay lip service to it, but then ultimately couldn't do anything with it. Like Visionaries versus Transformers has no meaning to it. It is like meat and punch. Now they obviously they work in concepts that would come up in Unicron and whatnot, but it's just like it is that Avengers versus Transformers crossover. You read that book because Ramjet's in it, and Ramjet is the best spotlight.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so you read Visionaries because it tells you some stuff that's set up in Unicron.
Yeah, Visionaries is it's a particularly weird one, I think. Sort of, and kind of uniquely let down by editorial. I think it's the perfect case study, I think, of sort of how the sort of almost sort of the grand plan for the shared universe started sort of going to seed a bit, I think, kind of because you've got sort of the kind of absolutely clueless use of kind of a shock death in the issue 1 that was and which they were so aware of the fact that it was a terrible idea that they had one of the like weirdly large number of editors, if I remember correctly, write a letter in the back of the issue to try and justify why this shock death wasn't actually like extremely lame.
It was a 2-page goodbye to the Transformer Cup, who you love, and just like, this is. But I don't object to killing any character, but this is not how you do it.
And then sort of the story. I mean, the story of that whole kind of that's mini smacks of sort of not having had good kind of guidance from editorial then as well, because the story what Transformers versus Visionaries seems to want to be about is about it wants to be a story about refugees and kind of conduct itself like that, but the scenario was being written into the Visionaries aren't refugees, they're the leftovers from a failed invasion attempt, and so kind of it then sort of makes like the book's attempts to be about refugees just immediately fall on their face, sort of like even just sort of literally even just the basic facts of like kind of what is going to like just what is happening, like where things are at the start of that miniseries, seem to sort of really struggle to line up with what the final issue of First Strike had been derailed to set up, and it just really does seem like editorial at that point did not have it together in terms of like actually managing this shared universe as a shared universe.
No, I think that's a really good way of phrasing it. So, excluding the Transformers books, what were the ones with Transformers in them? What were the ones you would sort of say like, hey, if you can pick up that physical copy, you better do it for theoretically in a perfect world where people aren't charging like £5 billion going forward. Like, which ones do you think were the most worthwhile reading?
Well, kind of, yeah. If we sort of step past Citizens GI Joe, which has Skywarp in it, of course, and which I did really love. I think kind of my definite standout. I think of the sort of Transformers free books would definitely be ROM. I think it's got it's mostly only kind of it's got a weak spot, I would say, which is that the third arc is a bit nothing because they made the frankly incredibly weird decision to do a backup strip, but then give pages from the main strip to the backup strip. So you've got like a run of like 4 issues or so where the main strip only gets 16 pages, I think. And so you end up with an incredibly nothing main strip and a sort of then like lightweight backup strip. But other than that, ROM I think is kind of a nice strong run. It I mean just even kind of like the redesign of ROM just sort of like easily just like one of the sort of early triumphs I think of the Hasbro universe. It looks cracking. But and then just it's a nice little kind of self-contained story, and sort of Rom I think kind of he benefits from sort of having the being able to have sort of some GI Joes and stuff show up to sort of tangle with them occasionally, and it's a nice kind of compelling little story that has kind of Rom and the Micronauts kind of as a finale. I would sort of like that's kind of easily one of my kind of favorite bits of Hasbroverse. Kind of Christos Gage killed it on that. Like you would think, you're going to write the finale for your ongoing ROM story, but you have to put the Micronauts in it. Would I think sort of waylay a lesser writer, but he wound up sort of turning it into sort of the best chunk of ROM or Micronauts, which kind of it really impressed me, that miniseries.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was a really strong one. I got super into it. When I heard about it, I suddenly I hadn't really known about ROM or anything like that, and I hadn't known much about like a lot of those sort of 80s properties and 70s and 80s properties and whatnot. So when I suddenly hear and my god, oh my god, the Marvel books were incredible, and I was just like, what? So I was very confused, and I found out that you can't use the dire rates the way they normally were because Marvel owns the license to the dire rates, and I was just like, I'm very confused. And then I saw what the original dire rates designs were, and I'm just gonna say I think the IDW ones are better.
It's true.
Better designs. It's true. But it was a surprisingly strong book. Again, it had that world building aspect I really liked about it. But yeah, no, I'm trying to think if I would say the first volume of Micronauts is well worth a read.
Agreed. Yeah.
Basically, before they become Micro, I think it's a great book. After they become Micro, I think it kind of goes downhill a little bit. I found the Microverse a really fascinating world. Again, they quite cleverly work in a Transformers connection there. But I think just the idea of how this society plays out, the powers, the way Karza works, and everything else. I thought that all came together in a really satisfying way. Whereas I found that basically once they're on Earth, it becomes tiny people defending themselves. Oh no, flee.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree on that with Micronauts. That first volume is it's great stuff, and then it sort of struggled to find its feet again. I think after Revolution, sort of I think kind of the immediate aftermath. Almost, I think something that you kind of definitely Mask also sort of struggled with was they were books that kind of coming out of Revolution started sort of were being written and plotted like kind of an ongoing series, because I mean they were, but then sort of kind of 5 issues later they're trying to have to kind of wrap things up because the books are getting dropped. So sort of with Micronauts, say you get sort of the great first arc coming out of Revolution. There's a sort of you get a little arc about them kind of getting away from the human scientists that had caught them at the end of Revolution, and that sort of it takes sort of like about kind of 3 issues or something, I think, for them to sort of like get away and kind of make friends with their who is like someone who's being set up as their human friend, but then sort of not a lot happens,
I believe.
And then suddenly it's all whoops, okay, now it's time to sort of wrap up the entire myth arc in Wrath of Kaza, which I think I remember sort of joking about it a lot when as it was running, but sort of there was a tendency as it sort of got towards the end for Micronauts just to become sort of increasingly sort of wishy-washy with its sort of myth arc plot, and just time travelers will say something cryptic and sort of like half explain something about an entropy storm, and you're like, okay, right, and it sort of it doesn't feel particularly satisfying.
Yeah, that whole entropy storm thing was such an interesting part of the first half, and then it was just kind of like, it's there, and it's solved off screen, basically.
Yeah. So sort of, I mean, even though it sort of was essential, like, Rom and the Micronauts was the Rom finale, I did appreciate almost that it did give the sort of the Micronauts sort of a nice send-off as well, just because, as nice as their first volume was of their series, I did feel like it sort of lost its footing as it went on.
So any other interesting thoughts you have on the universe? Because I'm kind of reacting to what you're saying here, but like, because I listened to a few of your old shows like back in day, and I really enjoyed it, and you seemed really passionate about the whole idea.
Sort of, no, kind of, I mean, and because, I will say that kind of when we first got the sort of the press release announcing, like IDW are going to do a shared universe, I was pretty down on it when we first got that press release. And I was kind of excited, this is just it's going to ruin what the Transformers books are doing. Who cares about Rom and G.I. Joe? But I actually kind of it was, I think, kind of just Revolutions, just kind of like silly fun, kind of like you said, kind of old fashioned kind of Marvel crossover kind of thing. Kind of wound up selling me on it. And sort of, I did then sort of, I back read some IDW G.I. Joe. I sort of, I went and read that Action Man miniseries, which just, that Action Man miniseries is just, it's delightful. And sort of, I wound, sort of, it kind of just still to this day, it feels slightly weird to say, but like I just genuinely quite like G.I. Joe as a concept now these days, which I never thought I'd say. And kind of once I'd sort of gotten on board with sort of, I see what's cool about some of these characters to a degree. Just it's cool when different guys team up and have a fight with each other. Sense takes over a little bit. Even just stuff like, I think kind of my favorite thing about First Strike is just absolutely the kind of the little cabal of goofy toy line villains. Like the only thing better than a goofy a goofy children's toy line villain is a secret cabal of goofy children's toy line villains from different franchises. It's just it's sort of it kind of from a storytelling perspective that kind of it had its successes and failures. Kind of like we've been saying, it sort of I think kind of editorial at times kind of just kind of struggled to kind of both like kind of keep a lid on it in terms of cohesion, and then struggle to actually how to manage this when we can't keep a lot of the books on shelves. But I think when it comes down to it, a lot of it is just sort of it's quite good fun having all these guys sort of in the toy box together.
So that leads to a question in my mind. Just like looking back on it now, like being aware, not just like the fun and everything else, but do you think it was a worthwhile exercise, and do you think we learned anything from it?
Yeah, I think I think it is sort of. I definitely think that kind of. Well, certainly, kind of for kind of like especially for sort of the bits of Transformers that I kind of particularly love, like sort of Barber's run. I think kind of it was a net positive. It made kind of certainly kind of the Unicron miniseries would not have been anything like as kind of grand in scale, I feel, as it wound up being had there not been this sort of kind of huge universe built up. And I think kind of just more generally though, it convinced me that it is actually quite good when the Transformers do exist in a world that is fantastical beyond just the fact that there are Transformers in it. And it's something that sort of is obviously kind of not kind of unique to this Hasbro universe experiment. Sort of like Transformers Animated obviously was a cartoon that had like Autobots fighting human supervillains.
Yeah.
I mean, even going back to Marvel, I suppose kind of there were kind of human supervillains and things. And I think kind of I think kind of a big part of the reason why it works is because a lot of the best Transformers storytelling does happen when it isn't nothing but robots on Cybertron, and when you do let them sort of exist in a world on Earth and have kind of humans to interact with, and other toy franchises turn out to be a great source of interesting humans. Like certainly, kind of if you put me in charge, like of a Transformers cartoon, if you needed, say, kind of something like Mech in Transformers Prime, just sort of a human villain organization. Like if I was making the decisions, that would be Cobra. Just why not? They're more interesting characters than anything you're going to cook up, especially for a Transformers show. The other side of the coin is, and it's one that's been discussed a lot, but it did. I think there are some people that will blame the Hasbro universe for causing that IDW continuity to end sooner than it would have otherwise, and it's a tricky one because I think kind of I remember looking at this kind of on some kind of a graph, and if you look at the kind of how the sales numbers of like kind of the Barber and the Roberts ongoings were going, it's about the same, but maybe trending slightly more down after the relaunch. So there's kind of an argument that if they'd kind of never done this, if they'd just kind of let More Than Meets the Eye and the book formerly known as Robots in Disguise by that point just kind of keep running, would they have made it, say, to kind of issue 100? And it's sort of it's a fair point, and I kind of particularly people who weren't reading let's say people who were only reading kind of More Than Meets the Eye or kind of only reading Till All Are One, I absolutely sympathize. I think Till All Are One, I think in particular, if Barber's sort of books kind of thrived with the Hasbro universe, I think sort of it did nothing great for till 01, which sort of, I think, sort of found itself repeatedly getting the short end of the stick with sort of kind of crossovers and well, I mean, yeah, famously it ended when it did because the alternative was that it was going to be the book that. Actually, no, I think if I remember right, what editorial were proposing, I think, was that Tilula 1 would introduce the Visionaries, and then Maglin Visaggio, who wound up writing Transformers versus Visionaries, would have done a just Visionaries book that I guess maybe would have been like a flashback thing or just like about them off doing something else somewhere else. But yeah, then they gave to Scott the choice of that or just an annual to wrap things up, and she quite reasonably chose that rather than trying to work a bunch of extra characters into the story she was already telling.
They wanted her to like completely throw out all the cast she had and bring in new characters, like the whole like not just like visionary characters, like every main character bar Windblade was going to be swapped out.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember talking to her about it, and she was just like, "Yeah, I just decided I'd rather tell I have a story in mind for these characters. Like I don't have a story in mind for someone else at the moment." Which is like why the Combaticon thing goes a bit unexamined in the wider world, and a few things get wrapped up the way they did. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I don't think I could put the blame on the Hasbro universe for the drop off of the books. Like I can't comment on the Barber side of things, obviously, because Optimus Prime is probably one of my favorite books from the IDW run, full stop. Certainly my favorite. It created my favorite version of Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
The best version in my opinion, and like developed Aileron and Soundwave and RC and did lots of really cool stuff. I think Lost Light's problems came from complacency. If I'm really straightforward about it, I think one there was a sense of the audience will read whatever, and there was also a sense of if I hit these notes, the audience will be happy, and I have forever to do this because this is going to be a 4-year story.
Yeah.
And then being told around issue 12, no, it's not. You have 12 issues to wrap it all up, and then trying to cram way too much into all of it while keeping a lot of the tonal shift that happened in Lost Light. The what I would call like the Sherlock syndrome of, listen, we're very clever in this book. And this isn't the dig at anyone. I think that's just I think that's what happened. That's what went wrong with the Sherlock TV show, is that they became very aware of how talented they were and became very aware, like, we can be clever. TM. And I don't know if James had quite such a realization, but I do think he went down that similar pathway, intentionally or unintentionally, leading to like what I feel like the scene that culminates my issues in Lost Light is, hey, I'm going to reference the Magnificence, referencing something I don't think I've talked about in 5 years. And then we're going to wrap it up in a page because the character I've done no redemption work on is going to have a gag scene.
Yeah.
That for me is the culminating point. Just like, I have no idea what this thing is talking about. And it's Nickel, and I don't like Nickel because Nickel's a monster.
Yeah.
Nickel's an unredeemed monster. And I also the scene where she's like looking over at the scavengers, and then she's like imagining the DJD there, and like it's clearly supposed to be like, oh, Nickel, and I'm just like, what the fuck? Unrepentant monster.
Yeah, I think kind of there is kind of there's definitely a tendency, I think, for people to be like, oh well, yeah, if they'd never relaunched the book because of the Hasbro universe, and it could have run to issue 100, and it could have been, could have been a lot better. But I kind of, I think
I was very cross with it by issue 7.
Yeah, I think kind of a lot of. I don't think a lot of the problems that Lost Light wound up having would actually have been solved by giving it more issues. in the end.
It's an interesting one. Like when I do sit down with someone to talk about those kind of books, it's going to be interesting because like I will defend Autobot Megatron until the day I die. I'd be lying if I didn't say he basically took over season 2, but I would also defend that character for love nor money. But I would also say God, that 6-issue arc where they removed them. I spent a lot of time trying to justify shit in that until I got to like the 6th issue, and I was just like, I'm done. And then issue 7 came out, and I actually got incredibly mad. I remember the review we did for that, where just like, you literally just erased season 2. And it didn't help that the next time we came back to not things, it was just like focusing on a Node and for so much time, and I don't like a Node as a person. She's not pleasant. Lug has done nothing wrong. I will always say that. A Node did not deserve the arc she got. Did not deserve to, like, this is a rant for another podcast, but did not deserve, like, taking up half to a third of the removal arc of your POV, basically your POV character at this stage.
Yeah.
And then, like, hey, let's talk about this new character and her inexplicable, ridiculous revival of her girlfriend. Which is ridiculous. How they did that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Also, Cyclonus is in here in a really abusive relationship.
I think kind of if there is something that you can sort of with Lost, like where you can put a kind of level blame at the fact it was relaunched, it is sort of that. I think if I remember right, that arc got moved up and extended, so that the kind of the first like trade paperback of Lost Light had sort of the main characters in it, and then you do wind up in this weird situation where we're introducing Anode here because she's a new character that has like plot relevance in a few arcs time, but I guess we introduce her now because we're doing a new number 1, so she could be a point of view character. But then because she doesn't actually have a place in this arc, she gets a weird little standalone arc that just sort of begs the question of what she's doing here until
and then the reboot happened and her relevance to the wider arc goes
until
away
like 8 issues later, where you eventually discover, oh, okay, right, this is why she's in the book.
Yeah, it wasn't. She's not a good character. I'm just saying it now. Due to events or whatever, I just don't like her. Like I said, Lug's fine. I ain't got no problem with Lug. Lug's fine. I don't necessarily think Lug should have not been dead, but Lug's fine. And Anode was just like trying to do too much in a book that was struggling, in my opinion. But anyway, that's a rant for another day. Is there anything else you want to say about the universe, the Hasbro universe?
But yeah, just kind of almost thinking about the sort of like final days of it, I think it did sort of wound up highlighting almost, I think, sort of kind of a lot of the sort of strengths or kind of weaknesses of some of the kind of involved writers, like Christos Gage winds up just doing kind of his best work on ROM to date, and kind of a killer Micronauts book under those sort of under the weird conditions of you're going to write the enter ROM, but you must also now put the Micronauts in it. Barber sort of really deftly sort of wraps up his book, and in fairness, Barber got he got an extra annual, and he got an extra miniseries in Unicron, which to be fair about it, he got more issues, but Barber winds up sort of really pretty neatly sort of getting everything in place for his finale and wrapping things off. But then meanwhile sort of like Roberts kind of struggles, to be honest, to sort of get a finale in and have the finale not just be a sort of laundry list of plot reveals.
I think that's a nice enough way to wrap it up. It's just like it wasn't perfect. it was an imperfect time. Some good came out of it, some bad. So, for this show, I'm going to end it with 2 questions for every person who's doing it. My first question is, you have complete carte blanche. What would you like to say to IDW at the end of the Transformers license?
Cool. I mean, to be honest, I think it really it can't be understated almost like how much of an impact IDW wound up having on Transformers in general. Like all this for all the stuff that sort of didn't work or was there's good material, there's bad, but Transformers has been changed forever by IDW, both in terms of like the lore of the franchise, for a good decade or so. IDW was basically Hasbro's lore incubator, almost stuff. Ideas about Titans and colony worlds and stuff wound up being codified by IDW. That's now become almost like the evergreen facts of Transformers. And then equally, it's also they also wound up revolutionizing what kind of stories you could tell with Transformers. Like people have now told serious romance stories about Transformers. There's been more representation than you'd ever seen in the franchise before. So I think almost it's just It certainly it wasn't for nothing, and how many years is it? It's about like
15. It was 2000. Oh no, it's 17. Yeah, because it was 2005. So it's going to be 17 years at the end of this year.
They've been they've been incredibly impactful on the brand. They've not been for nothing. I think both the stories themselves and what it's done for the brand in general is is something to be genuinely proud of as as a group of people working on it.
In that case, that leads into the second question. You're in a developer meeting. What do you say to the comic company that's taking up the Transformers license?
I think what I would say would be to not revert to not lowest common denominator appeal, but like don't go for something easy. Don't set out to make the new all hail Megatron, something that trades on familiarity. Try something that is that's fresh and new and welcoming, but don't just retread what's gone before, because as cliche as it is, Transformers as a franchise does thrive on change. When things get when things stay the same, it generally it doesn't get interesting. Transform the stories you tell, and then equally make sure that you don't almost like leave behind some of those steps and pushed envelopes that IDW achieved. Don't say, oh, let's not address things like romance or LGBTQ characters, because it will give 40-year-old nerds like a cooties feelings. Like don't go backwards either. Push forward, find something that's new and modern, but with broad appeal, so that it can be a genuine jumping on point that doesn't that isn't welcoming.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good way of ending it. Callum, thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, loved it. Anything social media or anything else you would like to market?
Yeah, I'm sort of on Twitter and other places under username Jalaguy, Jala guy. Sort username dating back to my Bionicle days in the noughties. And yeah, also I'll give a quick shout out to the TF Wiki community blog, which is kind of something where kind of I'm an admin on the wiki and sort of active in the little kind of community we've got going on Discord and things. But yeah, we set up this blog at tfwikicommunity.wordpress.com where we're hosting both kind of useful resources like kind of reading guides we put together. So if having listened to this, you fancy trying to read some of this Hasbroverse stuff, we have got we've got reading guides for that IDW continuity, for the current the kind of current Ruckley Transformers continuity, Marvel, kind of you name it. So we've got kind of resources like that, and then also some kind of interesting kind of just articles people's put together about just the history of kind of licensed cars in Transformers, kind of looking at the sort of the history of kind of Generations and its kind of precursors as a sort of modernized G1 Transformers. So yeah, there's kind of a lot of interesting stuff on there. By kind of a lot of cool people from the TF Wiki community.
Guys, thank you always for your support. If you'd like to continue supporting us, Patreon is moonbase2 at patreon.com. You can also send us an email to moonbase2 at gmail.com, and we're on Twitter, Facebook, Libsyn, and all those lovely places. Also, check us out in Weebly if the CC Bunker for Andy. Remember, if you're on Patreon, you get shows like this a week early. As long as you remember to put it out officially. So I don't know right now what the next one's going to be about, but I have enjoyed this little run we're going down. And again, we are now, presuming we make it to the end of the year with IDW, we are within 6 months, just over 6 months, I think, of the end of the road. 17 years and counting. Where will we go? Anyway, we'll find out. Thanks, everyone, and take care.
Thanks.
You are now leaving